Facebook's parent company Meta is blocking news content of all of its social media platforms in Canada, and Google is set to follow suit. You might have experienced this already. The companies say it is a response to Ottawa's passing of the Online News Act, which requires tech companies to pay for Canadian news content that is shared on their platforms. 2 years ago, Australia faced a similar scenario, and that ended with a deal between the government and the tech giants. We are already seeing blackouts and access to news sharing. So could a deal happen here? Senior fellow at the Centre for International Governance Innovation, Blaine Haggart, is joining us this morning from St. Catharines. Good morning.
Good morning.
Take us back to what happened in Australia. How is it different than what's happened here?
Sure. So basically, Australia wanted to address the bargaining imbalance between digital platforms and news media. Kind of a recognition that the important thing is that they wanted to do was to sustain the information ecosystem. Over the past few years, we've increasingly become aware that it's not just about sharing information. It's expensive to produce valuable and legitimate and authoritative news. So the original version of their law would have required the platforms to negotiate with Australian media outlets to provide some funding to them. But then, as we know, Facebook and Australia pulled their first tantrum, removed Australians' access to news. And the government's compromise there was to let these companies negotiate agreements outside the legislation under the threat of being designated and subject to the formal regulation.
So with that as a backdrop, is it possible that Canada could cut a deal?
Well, the thing to understand about this whole situation is that what Canada's trying to do is to improve on Australia's law. The Australian law was criticized for being basically very opaque and having issues with coverage. So Canada's legislation was designed to make a more transparent, accountable process with more companies or more news media involved in the negotiations and getting money. The issue for Canada is that this isn't about money at all. What it's about is about power. So basically, what Facebook or Meta and Google, who's kind of sitting in the background on all this, what they object to fundamentally is that they are being told what to do by a democratically elected government. They've signed agreements before. They've withdrawn those agreements with companies. What they object to is the fact that they're not able to hold the sword of Damocles over these companies, and that the government is trying to set a level playing field for Canadian media versus the platforms.
So if we can't broker a similar deal to Australia, where does that leave news consumers?
Well, I mean, in the short term, it leaves those who get their news from Meta, and more disturbing even is if Google, which as a search engine, if it gets involved in deciding to cut Canadians off from legitimate news sources. Canadians and Canadian news media, we do have a problem. The cold comfort for all of this is that this is a fight that was going to happen anyway, because like I said, it's not about money. It's about companies being told, basically these unaccountable global platforms being told that they have to abide by the laws of the land in which they operate. And if it wasn't this, it would be competition laws. Keldon Bester pointed out in the National Post, I think, yesterday. If it's not that, it's going to be online harms, because these companies, we should also remember, themselves are doing a lot of damage to our information ecosystem even outside of this, from promoting misinformation, running racist algorithms, introducing hallucinating chatbots into their search engine. And in the case of Meta, we should also remember being implicated in an actual genocide in Myanmar. So there is it is a problem here, but again, it's the problem of a company going on strike is something that was going to happen the minute they saw a regulation that they didn't like.
Blaine Haggart, thanks for bringing us up to speed this morning.
No problem.
You might have noticed that some of your news access has been blocked, and if you want to make sure that you still have access to news coverage, you can download the CTV News app, and clips from our show can also be found on yourmorning.ca.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.